Hey.
Hey guys, welcome back to our Chat with Coaches live stream. I'm Drew Harlow, and with me as always is my co-host and good friend and fellow coach, Naheed Overfeld.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me back again, Drew.
Oh, anytime, of course. It's our show. It's not just mine.
It's our show. There you go.
Yeah. So awesome. How's your week going so far, Naheed?
I will have to say that the energy in me has shifted drastically this week. I was telling a client of mine I'm literally vibrating because there's so much I want to get done. But that's not a good place to be either because I find that I'm not focused as well because I'm like, oh, this, no, this, no, this. So I'm like every shiny object I keep chasing.
Yeah, no, I feel that as in my mindset. I'm always looking at different things going on right now. So it's just there's always switching between multiple things for me. So that's kind of my standard operating procedure. So I can't really say that that's a new behavior for me. But I get what you mean. It can get really exhausting after a while sometimes.
It's just hard to focus.
Yeah.
You don't get one thing done and then you jumped onto the other one.
Right. Exactly. It's like squirrel. So, but today's topic is actually pretty cool. It's a little bit related to that, adjacent, I would say. It's about saying no.
Mm-hmm.
So and this is an interesting one that I've honestly only in the last year or two have really started to embrace more because I didn't used to say no to things. I used to be like, yeah, I can help with that. Yeah, I can help with that. Yeah, I can do that. Why not get involved with this too? Get involved with that. And just get involved with literally everything that I get invited to be involved in. And then I end up overcommitting like crazy. And I have zero time for myself or my own priorities. What's your experience been like this with this kind of stuff?
Yeah, I looked at it from a different perspective when I was thinking about what today's topic was. I went inward, not so much about recent stuff that I say yes to as far as commitments. If somebody asked me to do something that didn't have a lot of emotion around it.
Mm-hmm.
I realized that I stopped saying no because I used to think, well, that's being unkind. That's being mean. I'm going to hurt their feelings. And one day I decided to kind of look at myself in the mirror and kind of give a really honest assessment as to why am I doing this? Turned out it had nothing to do with me being mean or being unkind or wanting to not hurt the other person's feelings, but what it was 100% about was I did not want conflict. It was so much easier to say yes and not have to worry about the conflict that I would have been putting myself into to be able to say no. So maybe slightly different from you. I don't know. Does that sound like it resonates at all with you?
I think it does sometimes. I think it depends on the situation, right? For me, I think at the time back when I was doing that more, the saying yes to everything, it was more about kind of just I don't want to miss an opportunity to do something. Mm-hmm. So it's more like the FOMO, the fear of missing out. I don't think it was so much about that just disappointing someone else as much as it was more about just like fear of missing out on something. You know what I mean? It was fear of like, what if this opportunity is a good opportunity to take part in, or an opportunity for me to really jump in and have a new experience that takes me in a different direction. And so for me, I think that for what clarified that for me and allowed me to take that step back and say no to things is really clarifying my goals, right? And being able to say for myself, like, even if I'm disappointing someone, like, I mean, I think that came in certain situations. Like if a close friend is asking me to hang out or something, then I feel bad about disappointing that person. But for professional stuff, it was more about missing an opportunity for me, right?
Yeah, and that part I experience more of today. So I've been given an opportunity to speak, but I have to kind of remind myself, what am I trying to get out of it? What are the things that I typically get out of this kind of speaking engagement versus that kind of speaking engagement? So I, like you said, kind of go back to those goals. What's the ultimate goal as opposed to saying, ooh, an opportunity, let me jump all over it type of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, so, we get into different reasons for not saying no. But I wanted to just share that when somebody has a situation in their lives, or maybe they have a pattern in their lives where they're saying yes to everything, not for fear of missing out, but because they feel somehow internally guilted into it, or feeling like they don't want to disappoint somebody, or what was happening to me, which was not wanting to have the conflict in
Mhm.
having the conversation to say no. That was like a nice little twist in my mind where I was like, oh, well, it's because of them. It wasn't. It was because of me.
Yeah.
So, what do people do when they notice a pattern and you can see that pattern clearly? You just don't know how to stop it.
Well, it's talking to someone else about it, right? I mean, you get an external kind of opinion. That's where coaches come in really handy to be able to point that pattern out to people and say, like, listen, it's not about you. It's not about them. It's about you, really,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's that fear of conflict in your situation, the fear of conflict, in my situation, FOMO, or the fear of missing out that opportunity. I think that's at its core. It's a lack. Again, it's coming from a place of lack, coming from a place of scarcity. If you're missing out, that means what you're doing is less important than what you possibly could be doing. So there's a fear of just that idea of what I'm doing is coming from a place of scarcity as opposed to I'm on the right path, right? And I think that the same thing is true in the fear in the conflict situation. If you're afraid of that conflict, then the conflict's not worth it, right? At some level, it's like what you're doing, what you want to do instead of that thing is not worth it to you because you don't feel justified in that conflict, right? If there's a conflict that you think you're justified in,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm pretty sure you're gonna fight the battles you think you can win, right? But if it's where you're like, oh, I don't know if this is worth it. I don't know if I
Or
can,
I'm worth it.
or if I'm worth it, right? Either I'm not worth it, or the thing I'm doing after or worth it, or me in general, my goals in general are less worth it than that person's goals or what they want to do. Then now suddenly I'm not justified in what I'm doing, and I can't actually justify this. So I think about that movie. Of course, the movie. Yes Man. Did you watch it with Jim Carrey? I know you've not watched it. Anyone else in the?
Never even heard it.
It's actually awesome. It's a really good movie. This guy just says no to everything. In the beginning, he's like he has a
Is
situation.
that the compulsive liar thing? He cannot lie or he used to lie and then he couldn't lie. Okay,
Also
what?
a good movie, but also Jim Carrey, also a good movie, but different.
Yeah, I knew
Totally
it was Jim Carrey. I knew there was a connection.
different. Yeah, no. So Yes Man was about him basically. He's being depressed. He's kind of like avoiding his friends. He's saying no to everything, and then this guy from his past kind of like takes him to this conference where the whole idea is say yes to everything. Every opportunity is every yes is an opportunity to do something new. So he starts doing that for a while, and then he starts having crazy experiences that are just leading down a really really interesting path. But that being said, that's just kind of neither here nor there. But the idea of that movie is kind of like go after opportunities, go like seek out what you want, right? Until you figure out what you want, and then now you know what to say yes to, what not to say yes to. If you say no to everything, then you're missing out. If you say yes to everything, then you're still missing out because you're not taking time to define what you actually want to say yes to.
I think I get what you're saying. I mean, because on the one hand, you need to have experiences to know whether you want to continue with this experience or you want to pick a different experience to move forward with.
Right.
And it's kind of like that balance. As with everything in life, you can't say yes to every single thing because then you get depleted, overwhelmed, what have you.
Mm-hmm.
Or you can't say no to every single thing because then you're not living your life. So this is what I had to share with anybody who's listening or who resonates, which I think a lot of people really resonate with this topic. I know I did for a very long time, and do to varying degrees depending on the situation even now. But when we think about a pattern, right? This is all about patterns because it doesn't bother us if it's once in a while that we do this or once in 6 months we say yes to something we rather not say yes to. But this is when you find yourself in a pattern where you're regularly doing the same thing over and over again. We tend to look at what we're giving up, the cost of this situation, very narrowly. We may say, okay, well, so and so asked us to do X activity that's going to take up an hour of my time. And so we're like, oh, no big deal, hour of my time, right? But what we don't look at in that entire event, like event horizon from beginning to end, is so you're having a conversation with somebody and you're feeling uncomfortable because they're pushing you to do something you don't want. So already there's a cost associated right there because you didn't stop that conversation. You're moving forward. So physically, whether you recognize it or not, there's a stress response that's going on, right? I mean, you're going through that stress level. Then you have this whole situation going on until you finally say yes or no. There's that conflict in your head. I want to say no and I want to say this, but instead I say that. So there's that continual mental or emotional anguish. And then at the end, you do whatever you do, but you're not feeling fulfilled from that. Your cup isn't being filled, it's actually being drained. So now you're actually less, your energy level and your mental well being is at a lower level than when you started off before having said yes to this situation. And that's the full cost, right? It may not be just the hour here or the $100 that a friend asked for or whatever it is. It's really looking at that whole timeline to be able to say, this is the true cost of what this situation is taking from me, basically.
Yeah, and not only that, actually, the true cost even continues even after that, right? To the point where you start doing, you're all the way leading up to that thing, right? All the energy it takes to lead up to that thing, to where you're about to do the thing. You're like, damn, I should have said no to this, and you keep going down on yourself. Then you have the whole downward spiral of like, oh, why'd you say yes to this? What's wrong with you? You just start being hard on yourself in terms of saying like, you know, you're so stupid, you're dumb. Why'd you do this? Why'd you do this to yourself? You always do this to yourself, right? And then that cost continues down the line, even after you do the thing. Let's say you do it and you don't enjoy it, then you're even more hard on yourself. If you do it and you enjoy it, then it's one thing. But then that's something that it doesn't really matter in the short term, because you've already had that stress response. You've already had that response to the whole thing as a whole. But even before that, like, it's even if you're not getting pressured, right? People don't. It's not even like people necessarily have to pressure you. You just kind of just don't want. You want to avoid conflict. You're just going to say yes even without pressure, right? And so I think that with that kind of situation, you're looking at someone who's not noticing that cost, the energy cost, the opportunity cost, because you can do a lot with an hour, right? You can do a lot with an hour. And as no one is more aware of time than a business owner who has not a lot of it and feels like they have to, they can always use more time with that stuff. So it's something that you're sitting there saying, okay, well, I said yes to all this stuff because I didn't want a conflict, or because I felt bad, or because whatever these things are going on. Those are all things you can control, right? So when you work with your clients, what do you tell them to? So how do you address that with them?
So when I work with my clients, the first thing I do is, we go right back into where in childhood did you develop this pattern? It was a pattern that was created in response to something, right? So when was that early situation that comes up as we're tapping, to be able to say what's the connection? And then as we tap and do other kinds of things, what we're doing is we're severing the emotion from the situation. In other words, when you were doing that, more than likely when you were younger, you felt coerced. Some way or the other, you felt coerced, and that's why you did it, right? Otherwise, you wouldn't have done it. And so once you remove those emotions, whether it's guilt, whether it's anger, what resentment, it doesn't matter what it is. Once you remove those emotions from the actual event and the situation, what happens is today, when you bring yourself back into today's day and age and you are confronted with another situation that's similar, your subconscious doesn't go right back to that old pattern thinking that, oh my gosh, if I don't do it, I'll be unloved, I'll be judged, I'll be this, they're going to make me feel guilty. So you sever that connection, and now the adult in you can respond as opposed to that triggered child in you responding.
Yeah, no, that's cool. I like that. And the thing about that's my approach is a little bit different, obviously, right? So I mean, it's similar in the sense that we still look at their past experiences and try to go back to where they developed that rule for themselves. It's an operating rule, right? People create these operating rules that they need to live their lives by, or they feel they need to live their lives by, and the rules don't necessarily help you nowadays. They may have helped you at a certain point in time, or they may have helped you in one situation, but unfortunately, our subconscious doesn't always distinguish those situations, right? We don't always say, this is totally different from that situation, and we should operate differently. What we do say is, this helped at one time, and I don't know necessarily how to handle this right now, so I'm just going to use that old rule and keep using that over and over again. Our brains are really efficient in that way, in the sense of trying to make things work as quickly, as efficiently as possible. So we'll collapse old rules, and we'll create new rules based on old rules that may have been fallible to begin with, right? That's the fallacy in our logic. We look at things and say, this situation seems very similar to that one over there, and this is how that worked out, so this must be the same situation, so it has to work out the same way. So I'm going to operate that same way I did with that one, or I'll avoid what happened in that situation if that was painful. Then I'll take every step I can to avoid that situation in this new scenario. And so when we do that, it creates that kind of false logic that doesn't actually help us. It actually ends up hurting us, like in the situation of avoiding conflict. sometimes conflict can be good. Conflict doesn't necessarily mean fighting. It just means a difference in opinions or difference in points of view. And if you think about it, we always have differences in point of view, even from ourselves from 5 minutes ago. Every time we learn new information, we're developing a conflict with old information. We have to sort through that and decide which one of these things is true now and which one was true back then, and which one do we want to operate under. And so until we take that analysis and actually look at that approach and ground ourselves in some kind of reality as opposed to the world we live in our heads, we're not able to move forward in any kind of productive way. And so kind of that's where I kind of take my clients to kind of help them through that process where we're taking ourselves out of their head and out of the idea of like, let's focus on all of this past head trash really, and figure out now, how do we move forward from this, right? How do we get out of this old operating pattern and create a new pattern for ourselves that's productive for ourselves? And so then it's a pretty interesting process, but it gets you out of that idea of conflict, of avoiding conflict, because you reframe conflict as growth, because in theory, growth involves some kind of conflict. It's conflicting with your own self, and then it helps you that way.
Yeah, I think one word that sums up everything. It doesn't matter which coach you work with, what practice you go to, but it really is about awareness.
Mm-hmm.
Being able to bring awareness to the situation at hand in order to, again, see the full extent of what it is. And, one of the things that, as you were saying, that I thought of, I'm not a big sports person, but my whole family loves to play tennis. And they watch all the tennis programs, and Nadal, if you guys know anything about him, always has his little hand tick gestures, whatever it is, right? So he's got this thing that he believes that this is what he needs to do in order to win. And so when we do that, whatever it is, that's his, we have our own stuff. We're only paying attention to the times when that program, that operating program you talked about, worked in some way for us. We never stop to think about all the times when he does all that stuff and he doesn't win a game. That's never stopped him from saying, okay, maybe it has nothing to do with it. In his head, it does, and he's going to continue because he's only focusing on the times it actually worked for him. And he's not interested in changing it, which is fine. He doesn't have to change it. But if it comes down to something that was a pattern that's hurting us, you might notice that you continue with this pattern because you're only focusing on the times where there's a perceived benefit and you're really ignoring everything else. And, that's what keeps these patterns in place.
Yeah, and two things I want to highlight. You said one is perceived pattern, that's the important thing, or perceived success, or perceived, whatever.
Benefit.
It's all perception, perceived benefit, right? It's all perception. You think it's benefiting you, but in reality, it's probably not when you actually look at things and analyze it. But I want to switch back to what you said earlier about Nadal, and that's interesting because depending on the person, different focuses come out, right? Nadal overall he's won a crap ton of matches. He's done really, really well for himself. But I want to point to people who don't do that, right? Who focus on the negatives, because I know people like that as well. And I play a lot of poker, and so when I think of poker, you think about more than anything else. You think about the hands you lost, not the hands you won, right? You don't think about you can win 1,000 hands, and then the one hand you lose is the one you focus on. You're like, damn, I should have done this differently in that hand, or whatever. And football or tennis, same thing, right? Like, at least for me and folks that I talk to a lot, it's one of the two extremes. There's like people who focus only on the ones that they win, people that focus only on the ones that they lose, right? And you could have a million things on one column, and they'll focus on that one that they lost. And you're like, oh, that one hand, they get fixated. And I feel like what you get fixated, and I don't feel like this is kind of what it is, but what you get fixated on is what you continue to do, right? You continue to repeat that same behavior because you're focused so much on that behavior that you're going to now repeat that behavior over and over and over again until you take time to analyze it and then look at the patterns and really take an approach to it that is productive as opposed to just obsessive. Because there's a difference, right? You can obsess over something and make no progress on it. Or you can look at it and be productive about it and say constructively, how can I change this? What did I do differently that worked? And look at that comparison versus what didn't work.
Yeah, I like that. So we've given people a lot of information. I kind of wanted to bring it back a little bit and say, okay, so you've got this pattern. You say no. You probably feel crappy. you say yes, I'm sorry, you probably feel crappy because you wanted to say no. And if you have these patterns, I liked what you said earlier, right from the beginning. Talk to an objective third party, even if it's a friend, because they will notice these patterns in you a lot easier, and they can be that mirror for you to be able to say, hey, look, this is what you're doing. Part of the issue is I used to be very strong willed, extremely strong willed. My mom had a tremendous amount of time with me as I was growing up. So one day I told her in the not too distant past, I told her, I said, I wish I was like that today. And she's like, oh my God, no. But the point that I make is that as kids, we know our minds. I mean, what's the number one word a toddler who's just learning to speak says?
Why?
Well, I get no, no. You want to
No,
do this? No, no. They haven't quite graduated to Y yet. But it's usually no. They are very clear in their heads. They know what they want. They know what they don't want. And if you try to get them to do something they don't want, they're also very expressive, whether it's screaming tantrums, it doesn't matter. They express their pleasure and their displeasure very, very clearly. And so part of it is just a systemic thing, that a societal thing, whatever you want to call it, where it's so much easier to get us as kids to be compliant. We're taught to be compliant. The school system cannot handle a whole bunch of whys. Like, why
yeah,
do I have to do my homework, right? And then do it every single day. And so that is part of the issue from a parent's perspective. You need kids to listen to you, but at the same time, what we end up doing is squashing down their innate desires, because there's so many people. This is a little bit veering off subject, but so many people who come to me, ask them, what do they want? What makes them happy? The answer is they don't know.
no idea. Yeah,
It's been completely shoved inside. It's been pushed aside because we've been told by everybody else what we should do, what we shouldn't do, how we should do it, how we should behave. And that takes away our permission of sovereignty, takes away our permission to be worthy enough to say no or worthy enough to say yes. It just takes away, we become compliant, in other words.
yeah. No, compliance is the goal of education. So the education system nowadays it's not education anymore, right? And the folks who focus on education as opposed to compliance are the ones who create really successful and happy students. But at the same time, everyone else is doing the opposite. They're focusing on compliance, not on education, and that's why our education system sucks in this country so badly. It's really bad. Primary education, at least. Secondary education is different. Like advanced education and college is obviously pretty good in this country for the most part. But again, you're looking at creating compliant individuals. You're creating a lot of employees. You're not really creating any free thinkers. And to your point, Naheed, I think yes, I think that we do stifle that out of people, and we get to the point where they don't know what they want. I mean, I didn't know what the hell I wanted when I was 21, and you go to college and you're expected to pick your major that's supposed to determine the course of the rest of your life. And you have no idea what the hell you want because you've never experienced anything real. You've only experienced academia, and you think academia is real. I remember obsessing so hard over exams in high school and college sometimes, the early part of college, until I realized that they didn't really matter in the long term. Like no one gives a shit what your grades are after you get your first job. They really don't care. And your test scores don't matter at all after you get your first job. Like, it's really about experience at that point. But on the flip side, I think we've almost overcorrected at least on some level. This level of entitlement in today's world is almost laughable sometimes because people think that they deserve what they haven't worked for yet. So it's like we're overcompensating with this, like trophies for everybody. Like it's like everyone gets a trophy. Yeah, everyone wins. There's no scores in these games. It's like, well, then what's the point? What are you teaching? That you try your best and it doesn't matter because everyone tries, everyone wins, or everyone just shows up and so you win. That's not the world we need to live in either, right? So it's like kind of it has to be a balance, and there has to be a balance between, back to the original topic, between the no's and the yeses. And how do you achieve that balance? By setting your goals and understanding yourself. And again, awareness, right? Coming to creating awareness about yourself, about what matters to you, what your goals are specifically for yourself. Determine that first, and that will help you. Now you have something to evaluate against, right? Now you can point everything to say, okay, this person asked me to do this. I don't really want to do it. Am I justified in saying no? What's my goal? Is it going to help me towards that, or is it going to take me away from that and deviate from that? Well, let's take me away from that, then I'm going to say no, because hey, guess what? This is my goal, right? This is what I'm going after, and that's going to take me away from that. Now, this over here, this will take me further along that path, so I will absolutely say yes to this. And now you have something to actually point to in terms of like why you're going to say yes or no.
Yeah, and as you were talking, certainly as business people, we are encouraged to have our mission statements, our vision, right? Because that's what it does. It gives you, then you look at any situation and it gives you a way to evaluate which direction you want to go to. But
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you one thing that I didn't have as a corporate employee was any kind of mission for myself. I
Yeah.
mean, sure, you were like, okay, I want to get up to this level and, maybe have these many kids or whatever it happens to be. But that all very arbitrary stuff and not necessarily stuff that I even had my heart behind it. But I really recommend for everybody to have a mission statement for themselves. Who do you want to be? And that's a be. That's not a do. That's a be. What kind of human being do you want to be? How do you want to show up? It's so much more than I'm a vice president of this company or whatever the sort of the very typical things that people say. Because again, it gets back to, am I being authentic to this thing that I said I would like to move in that direction towards?
Yeah, and I love that, and I think that's exactly what I mean. I don't mean necessarily it has to be a goal like as a business owner, because that's one side of things, right? Mission statements are absolutely helpful, but even as an individual, as a person, as a human, who do you want to be, right? What do you want to achieve in your life for yourself? It doesn't have to be just. I'm not talking about just professionally. I'm talking about in life, right? What's your bucket list, for example, as the way people talk about it? There's a bucket list, right? And if you create that thing, that list for yourself, or that mission statement for yourself, as a person, who is Naheed? Who does Naheed want to be? What does she want to achieve in her life? Who is Drew? What does Drew want to achieve in his life? Those kind of things. And I've taken some time to do that, and I've done that years at a time, right? Like every couple of years I reevaluate and maybe I add something, maybe I take something away, maybe I achieve some stuff in those last years that I can knock off of that list. That's the ultimate thing we're looking at there, but it's not like you're setting it in stone. It's just this thing that you're doing, that because we're always evolving and our goals may change. And so you're accounting for that. But it's a matter of taking that time to set aside and say, these are the things that I want to accomplish in my life, whether personally, professionally, academically, doesn't matter. What are those things you want to do across your entire life?
And how do you want people to respond to you? Especially if you're finding that your boundaries are very fluid and people are not respecting you. And really, that's an energy thing. That's why we say no, we don't say no enough, right? Whatever our response is, it's usually because we have a fluid boundary and our energy is not strong enough. So, part of this mission or vision or whatever you want to call it is, how do I want life to reflect back to me? Because that's really all you're doing. Are people respecting you? Do they appreciate who you are and what you have to offer from a being perspective, not always from a doing perspective? And so all of that kind of comes in. So even though we're talking about this subject as though it's one piece, like it's an individual piece, it's really part of something that's a lot bigger.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And again, it goes back to energy like we talked about a couple weeks ago. The energy conversation is one that's always evolving, right? It's all about your energy and how you live into that energy. You can either stifle that energy, or you can let that energy kind of grow and build and be free to be expressed. And so, yeah, back to that conflict concept though, right? Or saying no in general, whether it's conflict or whether it's fear or whatever it's holding you back from saying no. It's just the best way to move forward from that is to create for yourself your own mission statement or your own set of goals or your own set of things you can refer back to and say, this is not something I'm interested in doing, right? I mean, when I started doing that, there's an amazing power in being able to say that. Like, I actually don't really have an interest in this, or I'm not good at this, so I don't want to invest any more time and energy because I have other things that I really want to do, right? Like, for example, golf, right? I started playing golf last year. I suck horribly at golf. I'm not good at all. And I was like, let me go check it out. Let me try it a couple of times. I got to the point where I still suck, and I refuse. I don't refuse to play, but if I have a choice of doing that or spending time doing something else that I can do for my business or from someone else I care about, I'd rather do that or anything. And yeah, I'll learn to play golf eventually if it matters to me. But right now, it's just not a priority, right? You can say that. You can ultimately say, this is not a priority for me right now. my priorities are X, Y, and Z. And that's typically going to be strong enough for people to be like, oh, okay, cool. And they'll probably wonder to themselves, wow, I don't have priorities myself like that. I didn't lay out my priorities like in a way that I can actually articulate them to someone else and say, these are my priorities right now. That's not a priority for me. And they might actually be inspired to do the same thing. But there's a lot of power in that.
That last part was exactly what I was about to say. I remember a friend of mine, and we were talking about restaurants, and I threw out some different types of restaurants. She's like, well, I'm not in the mood for whatever it was. I can't remember. Let's just say Italian. And it shocked me. I'm like, what do you mean? I suggested it. You were supposed to say yes.
Yeah.
And it is very inspiring when you see somebody else say, nah, I'm not really in the mood for it.
Right.
Without, I mean, not like you said, it was not a conflict. It was just simply stating an opinion that this is how she feels. Like, there was no conflict. The conflict was all up here for me. The perceived conflict or the expected conflict was more up here than it was in real life.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, so I think that's a really good one. I think that we covered today. I'm pretty much out of time at this point. It's like 31 minutes. But any closing thoughts before we hop off of here, Naheed?
Yeah, just to go back to what I said earlier, if this is something that really is an issue for you, write it down. Look at the last time that you had the situation where you said yes when you wanted to say no, and really write down from beginning to end, what was the true cost? What was the true cost to you? Emotionally, physically, time-wise, or whatever, money-wise, whatever it happens to be. And then it's about telling yourself, I'm going to make incremental changes, right? Just, it's not about changing it every single time, but the more you write down, the more you'll understand where are these patterns emerging. Is it one person more than another person? Now you've got information where you can start working on something.
Agreed. I like that a lot. And also, as you do this for yourself, you can't change the past, obviously. But what you can do is pay attention and create awareness about the future. So just if it's something that you think you struggle with or you think you've struggled with in the past, pay attention and just be mindful of that in the future as you have these experiences, as you talk to different folks, and as you're having these interactions with people and you have these perceived conflicts. Pay attention to how you feel. And like Naheed said, write that down. Write that down too. Write down exactly what's going through your head. What situation came up? Who are you talking to? How are you feeling about that particular situation? And then how do you feel both before and after you have the conversation? Whether you say yes or no, it's at that point it's helpful to still be able to say no. But if you're not able to, write down what you felt like doing that, what drove you to that decision. Do that a couple times, and the patterns will become very, very clear to you.
And Hachi agreed with you 100%, I could tell.
1,000%. Yeah. He wasn't yelling at the person outside who just delivered a package at all. That wasn't what he's doing at all. He didn't do that. But no, and if you have this issues yourself, or folks who struggle with saying no, comment below. Let us know what you're thinking, what kind of experience you've had in the past with this kind of thing. And how did you overcome it yourself? If you did, and if you're still struggling with it, let us know what you're struggling with it. All right? Let us know how you deal with it right now, or don't.
Yeah, I think that's great. And like I said, this is a subject that we all can get a little bit better on.
Absolutely. So thanks so much, guys, for tuning in today. I really appreciate the support and you guys watching and contributing. And I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. Let us know if you liked it in the comments below. Let us know any future comments or topics you want to cover in the future. And yeah, if you like this video, hit like, hit subscribe, share it with someone who you think might resonate with. And we'll see you guys in 2 weeks again.